Hi, I'm Greg Hunter. This is the weekly news wrap-up for August 22nd, Friday, 2014. My top story, you're not going to believe it, but I'm back in Ukraine. And I'm back in Ukraine because this is a completely underreported story, and the situation there is getting worse by the day. Never mind the unbelievable fighting in eastern Ukraine. I mean, it's ugly. Dozens are killed or wounded in the last week or so, and have vicious fighting in these small towns between the pro-government Kiev forces and the pro-Russian separatist forces there, and no end in sight whatsoever. No truce, no ceasefire, no peace negotiation whatsoever. I mean, it is ugly in eastern Ukraine. And then in the eastern European region, I mean, here, Bulgaria, that has for the second time stopped this Russian pipeline that can bypass Ukraine and, and take its gas into Europe, but they stopped the creation of that pipeline. And then, NATO has sent 12 U.S. F-16, F-15, I should say, fighters into Bulgaria, and 180 troops for war games, more war games. We've had those war games and troops and equipment in Poland, and, we also, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, has told the Estonia and Latvia and the Baltic States that, NATO will by a treaty come and protect you if need be. And those aren't the kind of words that look like the region is heading towards peace. The stopping of commerce and pipelines, that's part of the financial war. The war games, the troops, the jets, the equipment being funneled into the region. Russia on the other side with their equipment and tanks and equipment, on the Ukrainian border, and then helping the pro-Russian separatists. And listen, the Kiev troops have been on a tear. They've been just killing and gaining ground on the pro-Russian separatists. And again, I say there is no truce, no treaty, no peace talks. I mean, I'm sure they're going to make nice and talk nice to one another so they can say they tried, but this looks like it's being done on purpose. I mean, NATO knows that they don't want a country the size of Ukraine, which is the biggest country in Eastern Europe, to become NATO and have that on its border. And they also have Crimea, which has their Black Sea Fleet, which they took over, earlier this year. But they must know that. And Russia knows they can't let that happen. And NATO knows that Russia's not going to let that happen. So it looks like they're doing this on purpose. And even if they're not, even if this is oafish, clumsy, stupid, the result is the same. It looks like that Russia and the West, NATO, U.S., is inching towards war. They're not toning it down. They're getting closer to full metal-on-metal contact. And with the financial war, that is in full bloom. And by the way, the latest little financial wrinkle is McDonald's stores over in Ukraine. Now Russia is sending in food inspectors and health inspectors to take a look at McDonald's operating in Russia. And, McDonald's has one of the cleanest corporate cultures, and I'm clean in terms of cleanliness in the restaurant, because it's something I used to do when I was an investigative and a consumer reporter. I would test, McDonald's. In the U.S., they were clean. They were clean. And so now they're going after McDonald's, which is the furthering of the financial war, and it's just ratcheting up a little at a time. And boy, Europe certainly can't handle, especially some of the countries in Europe that are already decimated. Greece and Portugal and Spain, even Finland had to lay off workers. I said that last week. But this is ugly. And it is not getting better. And the financial war is going full blast. Next up, ISIS. Also known as ISIL, ISIS or ISIL, that's the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, Islamic State of Iraq and Levant, the Islamic State, the Caliphate, take your pick, let's just call it ISIS. And, Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel came out and said that ISIS poses a, quote, imminent threat. And I'm thinking, boy, they were just JV not that many months ago, according to the president, junior varsity. They weren't really ready for the prime time. And now I guess with the, the beheading of this journalist and the vicious attacks and gruesome crucifixions and beheadings and the things they're doing, in eastern Syria and western and northwestern Iraq, I guess it's gotten the attention of the Secretary of the State and the President. And, we've been on, dozens of bombing runs in the last week or so. And there's been some good news. They retook the Mosul Dam, which could have flooded Baghdad. It could have cut off power, and they could have done a lot of things by blowing up that dam. It looks like it's been recaptured. The Kurds have been, vicious fighters protecting their turf in northern Iraq. And, ISIS wants to do away with, everybody that's not ISIS. And so the U.S. is helping, along with the Iraqi government forces, have been also helping and gaining ground against ISIS with the help of U.S. airstrikes, which are pretty numerous these days. And so looks like the U.S. is being sucked right back into this situation. But I tell you, there's a lot of reports on the internet that this is a creation of the CIA, and that this is done on purpose. One thing's for sure, and I've been harping on this for a year and a half if you've watched the weekly news wrap-up, and I've said a while ago that we were basically arming in part al-Qaeda rebels, part of the force in Syria attacking the Assad regime, al-Qaeda rebels. And ISIS is an offshoot of al-Qaeda, and we have armed them in part. We have armed them. A lot of the equipment they have is stuff they captured from the Iraqi army in western Iraq. I mean, this is a problem, and it's more than just a problem of force. It's a problem of concepts. And that, the young Muslims over there that want to become terrorists look at ISIS and think, hey, this is young and sexy, and they're doing something. And they're doing something all right. And the entire region is now destabilized in all this, and we're in for a heck of a fight. And according to the Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, he goes on to say, this is way beyond anything we've seen. We got to prepare for everything. Get ready. What? I mean, all of a sudden we have to start ramping up our military spending. I guess that's what you do when you have a failing economy. Is that a good excuse for that? Are they saying get ready because they're now saying, oh, we're going to have an attack on U.S. soil, and oh, it was ISIS? Is that what's going to happen? Governor Rick Perry of Texas has come out and warned, and I think this is a good warning because he's been physically on the border of Texas, between Texas and Mexico, with all these, kids coming across and all these people coming across, and our border patrol agents acting more like nannies than they are people protecting our borders. And Perry says, hey, ISIS could already be in the U.S. The border situation on the southern U.S. border is so terrible that ISIS could easily get in and cause Americans harm. And here we have the Secretary of Defense now saying, wow, get ready for anything. And this after the president said, JV, no worries, everything's fine. And is this because the economy are we reaching the end? Are we going to have some big false flag attack? Are we going to have some attack just because we're inept and stupid? Is that going to be the excuse to bring down the economy? Is that going to bring down the economy? Because it's not better. We wouldn't be printing all this money. We wouldn't have all these, bond buying here in the U.S. and over in Belgium. We wouldn't have all the phony accounting. We wouldn't have all the opaqueness in the economy. We can't jail any bankers that could crash the system. So it's not looking good at all. And it just seems like either the leaders are intentionally being doofuses and incompetent and couldn't care less, or unintentional. Either way, the result is bad for America. And, the beheading of this journalist after being held for a couple of years by ISIS, and, the president saying that we're going to, bring him to justice, and we're going to have the FBI out there, and that sounds to me it should be more of a war crime because we're at war with them. ISIS, supposedly, we're bombing them. And they want that to stop, so I think that's probably effective. But, the optics of the president, the power of the president isn't the nuclear football or the command over the armed forces. Oh, yes, that's part of it. But the real power is the bully pulpit, the image of the president, the ability to build consensus with leaders around the world, our allies and people who aren't really our allies and just looking out for their best interest. The optics of the president making these announcements, and I don't want to get all Fox News on you, but it has to worry Democrats that he's, making this solemn announcement about this journalist and what we're going to do about it. And 30 minutes later or something, he's on the golf course? I mean, it doesn't look good. The optics are terrible. They must understand this and not care. Really. And I want to see the president do well no matter what party they're in, because when the president does well, the country does well. And when they don't, the country doesn't do well at all. So I don't understand. I really don't understand. Maybe you could just call it off playing golf one day. I don't know. The ceasefire between Hamas and Israel is broken, and I predict it'll be a long time before that is repaired. That's for sure. And one of the main reasons is that, you know, the Hamas started their another round of rocket attacks. Israel has responded. You know, they're doing bombing missions and also doing some pretty rough bombing missions to punish Hamas's leadership. They evidently bombed the Hamas leader's house and killed his wife and son in Gaza. And boy, that is not the kind of news story that settles things down. They kill Hamas's son and wife in an airstrike. They also killed some other top leaders of Hamas in Gaza. And this is a bloody, ugly war with no end in sight. They cannot reach an agreement. Hamas wants its borders opened, its prisoners back. They say they're an open-air prison. Israel says, well, listen, we did this in 2007 when you took control, so disarm and, and stop acting, having war on us, and we'll remove the blockade from your borders. Well, that's not going to happen on either side. Disarm. Hamas isn't going to disarm, and Israel's not going to, stop the blockade, and they're certainly not going to stop firing on Hamas after they fire rockets on them. So I don't see how this gets solved. This is going to go on for a while, and I pity the Palestinians and the more than 2,000 that have died. Most of them are civilians, and I pity the Israelis. They haven't had near the death toll, but they have a better bunker system, better missile defense system. They just have better protections all around, better warning system, but still ugly and not getting solved anytime soon. Ferguson, Missouri. I just want to start out with Ferguson, Missouri, and how this was turned into a huge race issue. And I don't understand the facts, the statistics about the race issue. I mean, if you just look at Chicago alone, I think last weekend they had 7 or 8 shooting deaths in Chicago, nearly 30 wounded just in the weekend. And you don't see Eric Holder up there. You don't see Jesse Jackson up there. You don't see any of, Reverend Al Sharpton up there. I mean, there's hundreds of young black people shoot each other every year. We don't have a black-on-white crime problem. And we don't have a white-on-black murder problem with gun crimes. I brought this up before. According to the FBI, 90% of blacks are shot by other blacks. 90% of whites are shot by other whites. We just don't have that problem. If you take a look at white officers, the universe of white officers shooting unarmed black teenagers, that's another whole total very tiny universe. I think this is more a social economic issue. In this case, it happens to be a black neighborhood, but I think it's going to be all neighborhoods and all colors, and all people are going to get squeezed by inflation and by a bad economy and possibly a collapse in the not-too-distant future. But that said, I mean, the facts in the case when I first heard this was a white officer shot a poor black kid, had his hands up. Well, that's not really the whole story, that the cop got his eye socket crushed in a fight in the car, and that, apparently, according to the autopsy report, the kid wasn't shot in the back, he was shot in the front, and could have been charging the officer and witnesses back and forth. Ultimately, this is just going to be a long, drawn-out event that'll probably render a decision where the police officer probably was justified with this kid charging him. I mean, supposedly they have witnesses, and the autopsy, the investigation may show that. It's an ugly situation. An 18-year-old lost his life, and, it's a terrible situation. But here's what I think the big takeaway is. Here we have Ferguson, Missouri, which is, between downtown St. Louis and the Lambert Airfield. I'm from St. Louis. Not a very big town, really just kind of a suburb of St. Louis. And here you have this situation, an rolls out military-style equipment in Ferguson, Missouri. And what everybody should be taking notice is that, wow, Ferguson, Missouri has armored personnel vehicles and total body armor and fully automatic weapons and high-powered snipers and a lot of different military hardware that came from, Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, the militarization of the police forces has been done in a large part by the federal government. I mean, this is actually surplus military equipment. And why are they militarizing police forces the size of Ferguson, Missouri? I mean, I can understand New York City having some armored vehicles. I mean, the UN is there. They have big dignitaries. They have Wall Street. I understand maybe in L.A. where they would have military-type equipment. Ferguson, Missouri, and little police departments all over the country are militarized. Why? Why would the federal government do this? Why would the federal government militarize these police departments? Because they have some sort of a standing army, which is what our forefathers didn't want, a standing army here in America because of tyranny. And then you have the erosion of constitutional rights, erosion of First Amendment rights, erosion of due process rights, with the NDAA, and then you have this ramp up of military power and this tamp down of constitutional rights. That's a bad situation, and I think that is the big takeaway in Ferguson, Missouri. A big takeaway in Ferguson, Missouri. Thank you so much for supporting USA Watchdog with your comments and donations. That's the way I see it. I'm Greg Hunter. Have a nice weekend, and fear not.